What's up, everybody? This is Matt from Inkspot Games, and today we're going to be looking at the new trading card game from Disney called Lorcana. Now, just recently, Disney has released the rules on how to play this game. I know there's a lot of hype behind it. I'm personally excited to see how it goes, and we're going to kind of go through these rules together to see how this game works. Alright, this is more of a beginner's guide, so we're not going to be talking much strategy or anything like that, but just kind of the basic rules so we know how to play this game and move forward with it. So let's just get right onto it. Alright, so first we're going to be talking about where all games should talk about, which is the objective. How do we win this game? So the objective here is to play different kinds of cards that lead to collecting something called lore. Alright, lore is essentially the thing that you need to get in order to win the game, and the first player to collect 20 pieces of lore wins the game. So that's the objective. Alright, that's what we need to do, and we're going to go through step by step how we can get to that point, obviously correctly and the best way possible. Again, just to reiterate, we're not really going to go through much strategy right now as I'm recording this. Only a handful of cards have actually been revealed, so there's not much strategy to go off of, but it doesn't mean we can't learn how to play the actual game. Alright, so we're going to look at the different kinds of cards here, and as of right now there are 4. The first one we have is the character card, and in a second we're going to kind of go more in depth into what each of these cards are and how to use them. First we have the character card, next we have an item, an action card, and an actually very interesting sort of card here, which is a song. Alright, so the character card. Alright, these character cards can be sent on quests to gather lore. They can get into challenges against other characters, and they can also have special effects and abilities. Again, a little down the line, we're going to talk about what a quest is and how you gather lore, how you challenge other characters, and what that means ultimately. And we're also going to be going over different parts of the card. Next, we have the item card. Alright, these cards give you special abilities and effects, and they stay in play during the game. Alright, we have an action card. Again, this is a card that gives you different advantages and effects during your turn, but these cards are discarded once they're used. And then we have the song card. It's basically used the same way as an action card, but a lot of the time it can have different advantages depending on what character is, quote, singing that song. So it's an interesting little addition here and can be used in some fun ways. So those are the 4 kinds of cards. Now we're going to kind of look at the parts of the card. And this is taken directly from Lorcana's official rule document. So if you want to look at this everything more in depth, you can always look at that document too. So on this side here, we're going to look at all cards. So this number up here in the hexagon, this is your cost. This is how much it costs to play this card. And we're going to talk about in a minute what you use to pay a cost, how you build up resources in order to play that cost. But keep this in mind that this number on the top left inside the hexagon, this is the cost of if you can play this card or not. So if you don't have enough resources matching this number, you can't play the card. Next we have the Inkwell icon, and again we're going to talk about the Inkwell in a little bit. The Inkwell icon is a circle around the hexagon that your cost is in. This tells you that you can use this card as ink. You can essentially use this card as a resource to pay the cost of other cards. Again, in a little bit, we're going to talk about what that means and how you do that, but just keep in the back of your head that any card that has a circle around the hexagon like this, that means you can use this as ink, as a resource. Next, we have the character name. and which version of the character that is. That's going to come into play, especially when it comes to deck building. Different classifications. So here in Mickey Mouse, it says Dreamborn Sorcerer. These categories are referenced, like it says, referencing card rules with different effects. They can do different things or work with other cards. So these classifications are important. Next, we have the ink, which indicates the ink type. We'll go over the different ink types in a second. This is basically the color of the card. But in the game, we refer to it as ink. And then here at the bottom in this big tan box, these are your abilities and effects and the different things your card can do. Moving over here, like we just said, we were talking about the ink. We have the ink key. All right. Each ink is separated by color. Yellow is amber. Green is emerald. Blue is sapphire. Purple is amethyst. Red is ruby. And gray is steel. All right, so these are the different kinds of ink and ink colors. And again, this can be found on the sort of the middle left of the card. And the card also, it's kind of obvious what color it is. Look in this general area and you'll know, oh, this is a purple amethyst ink or this is a yellow amber ink. For characters specifically, these numbers right here, the number on the left is the character's strength. The number on the right is the character's willpower. All right, these numbers come into play when we challenge other cards. Your strength is how much damage you can deal during a challenge, and your willpower is how much damage it takes before the card is defeated, essentially. We'll go over what a challenge is and how you sort of calculate that a little bit later. But that's what these two numbers mean. This is your strength. This is your willpower. And then last but not least, we have the lore value. So these little diamonds here, that tells you how much lore this character can collect. So if there's 2 diamonds here, the lore value is 2, which means this character can collect 2 lore. If there's 1 diamond there, the lore value is 1. If there's 4, the lore value is 4. And the lore value is how much lore your character can collect. And down here we have the rarity key, but that's more for individual cards. So moving on, we talked about the actual cards, but why don't we talk about the deck itself and how you can make a deck. First things first, each deck is fully customizable, which I think is always a plus in any card game. There is a minimum of 60 cards per deck, and you can have up to 4 copies of the same card. So again, your ratio here is 60 cards minimum, and then 4 copies of the same card. All right, and to sort of give you a little more detail here, okay? In Lorcana, you might see that there's 2 different versions of any given character, right? There might be 2 different kinds of Mickey Mouses or 2 Elsas or 2 whatever, all right? There can be a different version of the same character. So you could be running 4 of one version of Mickey Mouse and 4 of another version of Mickey Mouse. It's not just you can only run 4 Mickey Mouse altogether. All right, the different versions don't count towards your 4 count maximum. All right, so make sure you keep that in mind while deck building. And also, probably the biggest deck restriction here when deck building is you can only contain 1 or 2 different ink colors. All right, so you can either be all blue or all red or red and blue or green and blue. All right, but it can't be more than 2 different ink colors per deck. So we have our deck. All right, we know what the parts of the cards are. So we're going into a game. And how do we set up for this game? What do we need? What do we have to do? What's the correct sort of process to start a game out? Obviously, the things you need is your deck. I mean, if you show up to a Lorcana game without a Lorcana deck, that's a problem. It'll also be helpful to have counters, right? This is so you can keep track of how much lore you've collected throughout the game. Further setup. All right, before you start the game, shuffle your deck And it's always common courtesy in card games to offer your opponent to cut your deck. Next, you draw 7 cards. Each opening hand is 7. Then you can mulligan. Now, if you don't know what a mulligan is, or at least in the context of Lorcana, let's say you draw your 7 cards and you didn't really get what you wanted, right? Maybe there's 3 dead cards in your hand that you can't really use or you don't really need yet. What you can do is you can select any number of cards from your hand, put them back into the deck, shuffle, and then draw back that same amount. You can do that with your entire hand if you want to. But you can only do that once before the game. You only get 1 mulligan. And then the last step here is you determine who goes first. You can do that through die roll, rock, paper, scissors, coin flip, whatever. So we're going to be looking at the actual gameplay here and how the gameplay is organized and different things you can do within the gameplay. First things first is we're going to be talking about the actual phases of the game. Alright, first we have the beginning phase. Alright, essentially what this phase does is at the start of each turn, you're kind of resetting everything so that you can proceed with your turn. That's what this ready and set means. We're going to go over what exerted means in a second, but essentially in the beginning phase, you're resetting your board and getting ready to proceed with your turn. Alright, and the last part of the beginning phase is the draw. At the start of each turn, you draw 1 card, except if you are going first. If you are going first, you do not draw a card. Next, we move on to the main phase. So we're done with the beginning phase, everything is reset, and you drew your card. In the main phase, you can take any action, whether it be playing a card, using abilities, going on a quest, challenging another card, whatever. You can take any action, and you can take any action at any time in any order. Alright, this all happens in the main phase. Again, it doesn't really matter which order you do things. You can take all your actions here. So, speaking of actions, we're going to be talking about different actions of cards and how you use them. Alright, but before we do that, we need to talk about this term that we've seen a couple times, which is exerting. So, if you've played other card games before, exerting basically means the same thing as tapping a card or exhausting a card, whatever. When you exert a card, you are turning this card, which is from this horizontal position, which is known as vertical position, which is known as the ready position, and you turn it 90 degrees horizontal. Once you turn this card like this, that shows that you have exerted the card, that you did what you wanted to do with it. Alright, once you exert a card, it has to stay that way. Alright, cards stay exerted until your next turn. So if you're using your card, you exert it, you do what you gotta do, it has to stay like that during your opponent's turn. And again, cards that are not exerted are considered in the ready position. So vertical is ready and horizontal is exerted. Very, very important to know the difference. Now we're going to talk about a very critical, massive aspect of this game, which is the Inkwell. Alright, this is where you play your ink cards. Alright, this is where you use and manage your resources to pay costs to play cards. Alright, in this zone, alright, you can set 1 card face down in your Inkwell once per turn. Alright, and it can be used as a resource to play other cards. Now remember, you can't just use any card in your hand to be ink. It needs to have the circle around the hexagon, around the cost number, to be used as ink. Alright, and then once you use that, okay, you have to reveal the card to your opponent before setting it. Alright, reason being, you need to confirm to your opponent that the card you are using as ink can actually be used as ink, as indicated by the circle around the cost number. Each ink card represents 1 resource for paying costs, and you can exert as many as you need to per turn. All right, so let's say you have 5 cards set in your Inkwell. If you have a card that costs 2, you use 2 to play it, and then you have another card that costs 3, you use 3 to play it. And again, keyword exert. You also exert your ink cards because, again, you are showing that once you exert your ink card, which is the face down card, that shows that you use that card already. Okay? And yeah, so these cards are used to pay for costs and to show that you are using the ink in the Inkwell. You need to actually exert it just like you would any other card. Next, we're going to talk about actually playing a card, right? You play a card by placing it from your hand onto the board face up. Now, this is different from the Inkwell. We're not talking about the Inkwell anymore. Again, the Inkwell, you're playing the cards face down. Other cards you play, obviously, face up. And in order to play that card, you need to pay the cost from your Inkwell, which means you need to exert the correct amount of Inkwell cards to play, whether it's a character card or item or action, whatever. So the different kinds of cards here, and how they be played. So a character, again, played faced up. Make sure you pay the cost that the number shows using your Inkwell. And this is very, very important. You can't do anything with a character unless the card says otherwise. It's first turn, meaning you can't exert a character on your first turn. All right, in card games, we call this summoning sickness. So you play a character, that character cannot be turned or exerted until the next turn it's on the board. An item can be used right away, but items stay on the board. All right, an action, after you use an action effect, you need to discard it face up. And again, for songs, it's used the same way as an action, but the rules can change things like its cost and stuff like that. Next, we're going to talk about questing. Questing is how you win the game. It's the mechanic that collects you the lore. So, if you have a character on the board, you can exert that character to gain lore equal to their lore value. Alright, now, once you exert that character to collect the lore, you can't unexert it and use the character again. Alright, because we can't exert characters on the first turn they're played, you cannot go on a quest the first turn a character is played. Ultimately, this is how you win the game. So when you're playing, you say that your card is going on a quest, you exert it, and then you collect the amount of lore that is on the lore value of the card. Again, the lore value is like that white diamond in the middle. If there's 3 of those diamonds, you collect 3 lore, so on and so forth. And then here we have challenging. This is how it's called banish, but it's how you remove one of your opponent's characters. Again, the point of this game is collecting 20 lore in order to win, which means your opponent's doing the same thing. And you need to do what you can to slow your opponent down. And a great way to do that is to challenge their character and get them off the board. So if you're challenging your opponent's card, you need to exert your character and declare that it's a challenge. But here's the catch. And this is very important to remember. You can only challenge one of your opponent's exerted characters, not a ready one. So the only way you can challenge a character on your opponent's side is if that card is exerted. Remember, cards, once you exert a card, it stays exerted during your opponent's turn. So it's not like your opponent can exert a card and then it gets back to ready position when it's your turn. No, that card stays that way, right? Now, for you have to keep in mind that if you're exerting a card, that leaves your character open for a challenge as well. So make sure that you remember that and play your cards carefully. So looking at the challenge here with damage and how do we know a card stays in play or if it's banished, Characters damage, again, this is taken directly from the rules document for Lorcana. Characters damage each other in challenges, and also card effects can damage as well. Whatever the source, damage counters stay on a character until an effect removes them or the character is banished. So unless you have a card that removes damage counters, the damage counter stays on your card. So a character is banished or removed when they have damage counters on them that reach or exceed their willpower. Alright, so we talked about strength and willpower on the card. Again, the number on the left of the card is your strength. The number on the right is your willpower. So if you are challenging an opponent's character, you are comparing your strength to their willpower. So if we look at this battle right here, we have Captain Hook challenging Donald Duck. Captain Hook's strength is 3. Donald Duck's willpower is 3, which means you use 3 to 3, and once you put 3 damage counters on Donald Duck gets banished because there's 3 damage counters equal to its willpower. Again, Donald Duck's willpower being 3, and Captain Hook's attack being 3. Now, when you're challenging an opponent's character, they can also deal damage to you. So Donald Duck's strength is 2, but Captain Hook's willpower is 4. So Donald Duck is going to deal 2 damage to you. So Captain Hook, he'll stay in play, but he has 2 damage counters on him, right? So essentially you're comparing your character's strength to your opponent's willpower, and if the amount of damage counters on your opponent's character or on your character is equal to or above your willpower, your card's gone. It's banished. Alright, it's off the board. So one thing to keep in mind here is that we have all these rules, and all these rules stay the same throughout the game, but it's also important to remember that right now, only a limited amount of cards are actually released in the game. I mean, the game technically hasn't even started yet, but we only know a certain number of cards right now. And number 2 is that you follow these rules unless a card says otherwise, right? So you have to make sure that we're following the effects on the cards carefully so you're getting full value from them. I'm going to make another video after this, kind of showing these in action. I'm not really going to play like a real big game or anything, but we're going to kind of put these rules into practice and show you what using and playing these cards look like. But that's for a later video. I hope this one helped, and I'm really excited about this game. I can't wait to see what Disney does with it and how they make it grow, and it seems fairly simple to play once you kind of get the hang of it. But yeah, so I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.